All right. Welcome to Tuesday. We're talking about Immanuel Kant, and we're going to leap from where Kant left us off to a couple of ideas here. And the first of those ideas in Immanuel Kant has to do with this idea of sensibility we talked about on Monday. And it has to do with this idea of what is reasonable on the basis of reason, okay, as a thing that's actually reason, not this hyper rationality that becomes in Kant's mind, that becomes irrational, that he's watching unfold before him in his Enlightenment day and age. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then I want you to hit pause, do some reflecting, and then come back to the video. So is belief in God a reasonable thing that we could prove to be reasonable? Choosing my words carefully there. Prove to be reasonable. Second, can you prove God's existence? Answer those. Okay, just take a few minutes, jot some ideas down, and then come back. All right, so we've resumed here. Here's the deal. Because Kant says that reason itself has to be a reasonable thing, he's going to end up opening up some space now for things like faith, for things like morality and ethics, not to be derived from some set of pre-existing or predetermined knowledge. In other words, morality as an independent thing that is reasonable might actually do more for what we know than what we know informing our morality and ethics. So it works a little bit like this. Kant believes in reason that is reasonable and is reasonably applied to life's circumstances, scenarios, and underpinnings. So that what we understand about the world isn't hyper-rational sort of reactionism, but is a reasonable system of belief. So he says this: God, this concept of human liberty, he calls it human freedom, and morality or immorality are all based on sort of moral principles of rights and wrongs. Believing in those principles and in those persons or ideas becomes unreasonable only if there is definitive proof that something we believe is actually false. Okay? So it works like this. Kant, in a way, sort of restricts belief in God and in morality. Well, he doesn't restrict belief in God or belief in morality. Kant restricts knowledge and what we can know. Kant restricts knowledge and what we can know to the realm of existence that's directly in front of us. And in some ways, he's right. Okay? Kant then, because he has restricted knowledge to what is directly in front of us in the world around us, the world of nature, what he calls this sensible world, right? We talked about that yesterday, that the sensible world is perceivable to the senses, okay? Then things like God and moral principles of right and wrong get relegated almost to a realm that is completely unknowable to us. Well, not completely. It's unknowable to us. So by doing that, though, we're now in a place where we can neither prove nor disprove that God exists, that those moral principles are real and are valid and are eternal and are universal. We can't prove the human soul. We can't prove these concepts or ideals of human liberty and freedom. But we have left room now for these principles, these concepts and ideas, okay, to be validating ways we look at the world around us. So morality can be valid even if the principles are transcendent realities that come from somewhere beyond us. So then we can use moral arguments, or in certain cases, the ontological argument for the existence of God, as validation of faith, of morality, of religion. So we can create these kinds of logical and rational and reasonable, axiological or religious proofs for the existence of God, for the need to be moral and ethical people, for the concepts of human freedom, for the understanding of the human soul. Because science, Kant says, only speaks to what is present in front of us in the tangible world that we can experience by the senses. Science cannot answer questions that go beyond this realm of existence. So, for example, we can look at the universe and we can see evidence of the expansion and the movement of the celestial bodies, which would indicate something like a Big Bang, perhaps. While that evidence is there and that indication is there, that does not necessarily mean that there is not a God. And so just because there's evidence of some mechanical process doesn't mean we can automatically conclude that something didn't start the mechanical process. He says that science and what science can tell us applies to the appearance of things according to the senses. But the soul, perhaps even the self, we'll keep it, we'll do it this way first. The soul and the self are located in a realm of things that are not based in appearances. They're based in a kind of transcendence because they originate with someone like God. So humanity being made in the image and likeness of God means that what's at least part of, core to the identity of what it is to be a human person, cannot be defined and described by what is present to us in the senses and in the world around us. What is here in the realm of appearances cannot describe what is true of the soul, what is true of a kind of deeper human freedom than just the liberty to come and go as we please. It cannot describe the truth about God or about why this is the right moral or the wrong moral act. There are two kinds of things that Kant then wants to take his time and talk about. The first of those things is what he calls the metaphysics of nature, and that is what science can talk to us about, the appearances of things in this present realm of existence. Second is what he calls the metaphysics of morals, which is the reality of things as they exist, even if that is transcendent of right here, right now. So while we may not be able to prove certain things, it's still reasonable to believe them, and it's still probably especially reasonable to believe them according to traditional Judeo-Christian worldviews and understandings of them, because they can be reasonable without having definitive proof of them. This leads him into the last thing we want to talk about with Kant. And this actually means that on Wednesday, we'll be able to start in with Kierkegaard. So here's what he says. Our understanding is the source for what we would consider to be general laws of nature. Remember, he believes that our observations and our observing of things creates our understanding of them. We actually build our cognitive understandings of the world around us. It's not given to us. It's not discovered. We actually create them as we interact with what we observe. So then he says this: the way that we understand the patterns and the consistency of the existence that we live in and the nature that we are part of, okay, we then take that understanding and apply it and give law to ourselves. So our understanding provides us with a law, okay, that creates a framework for the way we encounter our experiences after that. We don't have specific knowledge, but we have a framework in which we can take in information, decipher it, and know something about it. We are beings that can be aware, conscious of self, and that can understand and construct intellectual information from our experiences such that we add knowledge from what we experience around us. So then he says this: the moral law or the moral principle that governs humanity is a single fundamental principle, and it's the product of reason, and it is sensible. Okay. This isn't something we construct. This is a single fundamental principle that reason provides us with. Morality is an intelligible thing. It does not belong to the world of the senses. Remember that? It belongs beyond the world of the senses and is dependent on the nature of reason, but presents us with what he calls the categorical imperative or the moral imperative. Basically, what he says is it presents us with a human duty and responsibility to decipher through reason what is moral, and then to give itself a moral law. The moral law becomes a pattern for moral conduct that we ought to strive for. By using reason to decipher intelligible principles and then determine a moral course of action, the moral imperative, Kant says we are self-law giving. We are autonomous. And here I have a problem with Kant. We can decipher principles and determine actions as moral or not all we want. It doesn't mean that we're right. It also doesn't mean that, well, hold on. I'm going to back up a second. It doesn't mean that we're right. What Kant is discounting here is our ability to do the thing we know is right. And that our willingness to do what we want, as opposed to doing what is right, has a tendency to get in the way of what we want to believe is the right thing to do. So we can have a pattern for moral conduct that we should strive for. But if we give it to ourselves, then the tendency is always going to be to use reason to create a system of moral conduct that is favorable, easy, not the pattern of moral conduct that God establishes in the scripture. Practically, for Kant, philosophy deals with things in themselves, but it does not give us the knowledge that we need in order to justify it does not give us the knowledge that we need of things in truth. It provides us with a justification that have some sort of practical purpose. Okay? So what he ends up creating is a system whereby we justify what we think is best, but we may not actually have to know what is really best. Okay, so by being self-law giving, we create our own moral system and code. But that moral system and code needs information that's beyond this realm of existence. And so for Kant, we have to access it by reason. So what we tend to do then isn't work into a principle that demands more of us. We tend to work toward a justification of what we already do. And that's the problem with the way that Kant takes this. If he would have taken this one step differently and gone, okay, so if God and morality exist in a space that isn't knowable to us, and so it needs to be revealed, then reliant upon revelation for something, he could have created a very seriously Christian set of morality and ethics. But Kant doesn't go there. He's intent that reason itself is all we need to prove reason itself is justifiable. And by doing so, what he sets out to do is justify what he considers to be appropriate uses of reason. And with that, justifies the way he uses reason to draw conclusions about the way in which he is going to live anyway, and others in the similar camp. Okay. That is a very compressed version, and normally I would do this in some discussion format that would take a bit more time and be a little fuller than a 20-minute or so video here. But this will cover us as far as Kant is concerned. And then we will pick up with this, or with Kierkegaard. Actually, we'll pick up with Kierkegaard the next time that we get together, which will be Wednesday. And we'll tackle Kierkegaard in a couple of days, and then we'll have Friday for some question and answer and some discussion stuff. Okay? Happy Tuesday, guys. I hope you're having a good week. Talk soon.